For the bubble hit in 2000, feeling very nervous ahead of that. And then again in 2008, I think I was, scared from 2004 on with that one. So I have a tendency to feel these things. And what I keep saying is interesting about now is I don't feel as worried. And believe me, I'm looking. I am looking for warning signs. Do you think this year's going to be a good one?
Oh, I think we're all looking for warning signs, Trish, and I agree with Gary B. and with John. 2018 is going to be a great year. We've seen glimmers of it for the past year. As a matter of fact, the Dow has been trending up over, I think, the last 13 consecutive months. But I also think there's going to be a slight correction, anywhere from possibly 5 to 10%, because, it can't continue to keep chugging along like it is forever. But I think things are going great. I think 2018 is going to be a great year.
Well, why not? I mean, why does there have to be a 5 to 10% correction, Danielle?
You know what? It's in the lap of the gods. We will see. The Nasdaq is up 29% year over year. Dow Jones up 25% year over year. It's been a banner year, as Deneen indicated. I'm interested to see whether we're going to see more retail investment in the coming year. Tax cut, people have more money in their pockets. Will we go back to the levels pre-2008, 2009 and get retail investors back in the stock market where they can be seeing the incredible gains that institutional investors are seeing?
Yeah, because, mom and pop investors, I would think, Jonas, there's still a lot of money right now on the sidelines because there are a lot of people that really haven't bought into the growth story. I mean, and not just Paul Krugman, who basically said on election night the market was plummeting and it would never recover from the depths that it would reach. There's a lot of people out there that have been waiting for an opportunity. Is now it?
There's been a little bit of a zero-sum game where people who were anti-Trump are, they're taking money out of the market, and people that were anti-Obama are putting money in the market. I don't know if it's a wash with retail investors. I'm a little concerned it's a little too good. It's like we're in this really strong economy. It's the strongest we've had now in many years, and now we're doing tax cuts into it, and that's a little strange. Is it going to cause inflation? Is the Federal Reserve going to try to fight this perception of inflation and cause rates to go up? It wouldn't take a lot of interest rate increase with the amount of debt in this economy to cost more than the benefit to consumers of the tax cut. There's over $10 trillion just in mortgage debt out there, for example. So I'm a little worried the good times might create bad times, just fears, people looking for a correction. So I'm more worried about the unknown bubble starting that everyone's piling money in or whatever, or rates. Something we're not expecting. It isn't obvious. To your point, it doesn't look like a bubble. It doesn't look like there's a real estate underlying bubble. So that's what's dangerous in itself.
We got lots more to talk about. Don't go anywhere. Cavuto on Business in just about 20 minutes from now. Charles Payne is in for Neil Cavuto. Hey, Charles, what do you got?
Hey, Trish. As New York City gets ready to drop the ball on New Year's Eve, President Trump reportedly getting ready to drop a $1 trillion infrastructure plan. But someone here says, not so fast. What about the national debt? And tired of paying to replace your busted iPhone? Why new lawsuits say you shouldn't have to. See you soon.
Okay, Charles, thank you. We're looking forward to it. But up here first, ahead of the ball drop, security building up. It is not just New York. Some cities are spending more this year to keep you safe. And someone here says after a number of deadly attacks in 2017, we cannot afford not to. Next.
Live from America's News headquarters in Washington. Happy New Year's Eve. I'm Leland Vittert. A shooting at a law firm in Long Beach, California, has left 2 people dead, including the suspected gunman. Witnesses say the man opened fire during a holiday party before turning the gun on himself. A second person who was shot is in stable condition. Investigators are searching for a motive, but they say it's a case of workplace violence and not a random shooting. Frigid temperatures have gripped much of the northern United States, and they're not going anywhere for a few days. This is Lake Erie in Hamburg, New York, just south of Buffalo. It's been frozen solid in 16-degree weather. Wind chill advisories or warnings are in effect for much of New England, northern Pennsylvania, and New York. In so much of the country, it will be a very cold New Year's Eve. I'm Leland Vittert. Now back to Bulls and Bears.
Police are ramping up security as millions prepare to ring in the new year. Following a wave of deadly attacks against civilians in 2017, cities nationwide are hiking security measures and costs for tomorrow's New Year's Eve celebrations. John, it seems to me, gosh, we should be willing to sort of spend whatever we need to spend to keep Americans safe. Where do you come out on that?
I think we are, and I think we should. Look, I was just in Mumbai, India, and I stayed at the Taj Mahal Palace where they had the November 2008 terror attack of the group out of Pakistan. It's, I think, a prototype of what you're going to see, say, in Vegas on the Strip and in hotels and different places around it that have a broad audience that comes through that you have to check. You walk in, you have security there every time you walk through the front door, but it's seamless. They've done it so long. So I think people are willing to pay a little more, but unfortunately, that's the world that we're in. And to keep us safe, I think it's worth it.
You know, Danielle, I think about how life is in a place like Israel, where they're confronting these threats on a daily basis, and they've learned to deal with it. That said, Israel's a much smaller country, a smaller place. The United States, much larger. It would be much more challenging for us to live our lives that way. But is that what it's going to come to?
You make a really great point. The issue with terrorism is that it is so quickly able to change tactic. Terrorists are able to change what they do and when they do it in response to the way that we are better protecting ourselves. So I would submit that being in New York City and Times Square on New Year's Eve is one of the safest places to be in America. So I'm a terrorist, I'm thinking where are the soft targets? Where are the places that aren't as protected as some of these big global cities? I think that's a problem. We also need to spend money not only on protecting the homeland, but thinking about the causes of radicalization. So that's trying to defeat ISIS where it is, worrying about humanitarian crises and other things that are causing migration, and where we are starting to see Islamic terrorism take hold in places where people are really feeling that they're not being taken care of by the global community.
Deneen, you know, Danielle's making a good point that they'll go after the soft targets. That they know there's going to be a ton of security there in New York City on New Year's Eve, so they may choose something that's less obvious. But once again, maybe it gets us back to how we have to start living our lives, as much as we hate it, rather differently.
Well, unfortunately, there are going to be risks anytime you have a big gathering, but I don't think resources are the problem. Of course, they're going to go above and beyond when it comes to resources. I think what it really comes down to is see something, say something. You look at the San Bernardino shooting, for example. There was a neighbor who saw or heard something. They were afraid to come forward for fear of being called a racist. There's also, with companies being proactive, Disney hotels are now implementing a policy for hotel staff to go into rooms at least once a day. So clearly there are initiatives that are being put into place to keep Americans safe.
You bring up an important one. See something, say something. Gary B., we're in this environment now that's so increasingly polarized, and the left hates the right, and the right thinks the left is unfair. And gosh, you know, I think that some Americans worry that if they report something, if they see something and they say something, they are indeed at risk of being labeled Islamophobic.
Well, I agree with you, Trish. I think anytime, no matter what you do, when you step out the front door, you're at a lot more risk than you were even 5, 10 years ago. But I will disagree, and I'm going to sound very cold-hearted with some of my fellow panelists here. The resources are not unlimited. Take the car industry, for example. They could make a car where no matter what happened, no matter what kind of accident you got in, you walked away 100% safe. They could make Times Square almost 100% terror. They could line it with tanks. They could make every single person entering Times Square go through a metal detector. They don't do that because there are cost trade-offs. We can't just, I'm sure, makes millions of dollars from tourists coming in. They have to weigh the cost benefit. How much is it worth them to make sure that people come back for the 2019 New Year's and prevent terrorism? There's a trade-off there. If they're having the Super Bowl organizers need to think ahead. They just can't spend infinity. They can't spend zero. There's got to be a trade-off there.
Yeah. Jonas, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm between Gary and the guest. I mean, we're not Israel. We're lucky. Like, we don't have, like, Mexico and Canada lobbing missiles into our country. Like, we don't have to take it as seriously as other countries and spend as much. You have to spend an uneconomic amount. If this was a libertarian country with no government, Apple wouldn't spend as much as we do to protect a store. They would just get insurance and take the occasional bombing. So you got to be a little rational. It makes people comfortable to see people with machine guns. But at the end of the day, you can't spend unlimited money to knock out that 99.99% chance of an attack.
Yeah. All right. Well, something to think about as we go into this holiday. Thank you so much. Cashing in just about an hour from now. Lauren Simonetti, what do you guys have coming up?
Hi, Trish. We're digging deep into President Trump's first year in office, what he did right in 2017. And what he needs to do in 2018 to make the economy great again. Plus, things are getting hairy after an interview with Harry. Did the former president just take a shot at the current president in an interview that aired overseas? That controversy when we see you on Cashin' In at 11:30.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Lauren. We will be watching. But up here first, if this massive market run-up isn't enough to get millennials excited about investing, well, maybe something Kim and Kanye just did is. How can you profit from their moves, no matter your age?
Critical injury.
Kanye West found the perfect stocking stuffer for Kim Kardashian. The rapper gifted his media mogul wife hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stock in companies such as Disney, Amazon, and Apple. And Jonas, you know, I don't think it's the most romantic thing in the world. But let me ask you this. Do you think that it will get more millennials interested in investing?
I gotta start giving my wife things that we already own jointly anyway as a gift. But I will say, you know, millennials have a problem with investing. They don't trust it, and yet they're day trading stocks with margin with some of these apps, and they're buying cryptocurrencies. So I'm really glad that this happened to make the awareness of the real investment is owning stock in America from any valuation in the Dow. That said, I think some of these stock certificates are questionable. You can't get your stock certificates in some of these companies anymore.
Deneen, why aren't they trading stocks? Why aren't they investing? Why aren't they saving? What's wrong with millennials?
Well, a lot of them don't have jobs, so that's a problem. But it's possible that they may catch on with Kanye and Kim because they do have a big social media following, and it would be important for millennials to be gainfully employed and to learn about economics and investing and what it means, what interest rates mean, and not to incur a lot of student debt or credit card debt.
Danielle, is it that, you know, the millennials have lived through, frankly, some pretty tough times? I mean, they have come of age in a very difficult economic environment, and they have seen the market go, I mean, at least twice. 2000 and 2008. Is that part of this?
I think it is, and I think the other thing is, to your point, millennials have on average about $41,000 in student debt and are making, you know, average of $38,000. It's not a lot of money. They don't necessarily have a lot of disposable income to be investing. The other thing is that they tend to buy experiential products rather than retail things like houses or stock. So there's a behavioral aspect, but there's also an economic aspect.
Yeah, you mentioned that student loans are a real problem. Gary B., that's something we need to address. I mean, you got kids taking out all this money. They can never repay it. Do you like what you're hearing from President Trump, where he's focusing on vocational opportunities? In other words, there's a whole lot of other kinds of jobs that maybe don't take a 4-year education and hundreds of thousands of dollars to be in.
I do. I like it a lot. I have two millennials, both with graduate degrees. Both had to essentially reinvent themselves. But here's the thing about millennials and investing. Higher prices begets interest. So as the prices rise, more millennials will start to discover the stock market. I hope it's not too late.
John, I've got an 8-year-old daughter who saves like you wouldn't believe. I'm so proud of her. She saves every single penny, never wants to spend any of it, but she's kind of amassed a little bit here from her chores and allowance. And she was talking to me about maybe could she buy a share of stock in Barbie. So you're going to have to go to Mattel for that. But this was encouraging to me. I mean, I wonder if it goes somewhat in generational swings. It may have something to do with what her mother does for a living, but is there hope for the next generation?
No, there's not. Look,
come on.
The greatest generation got a gun and were told to storm Normandy. These kids want a selfie stick and a safe place. There's not enough time to deal with what's wrong with millennials.
Oh,
Gary B's kids
no,
aside,
I wasn't talking about millennials, though. I was talking about the generation after millennials. I'm encouraged by them. I'm with you.
Your daughter, Trish.
I don't know what happened to the millennials. I really don't. But I think too much coddling is not a good thing. Anyway, let's hope for the best. Thanks so much to Deneen and Danielle for joining us. I know you got a little one too. Coming up next, have you ever wondered how good our guys really are at picking stocks? Well, we're going to take a look at their best and worst calls from 2017, and they're going to give you their picks to make 2018 a big year to remember. most fair and balanced way to make money on TV, our gang's best and worst calls in 2017, and how you can still profit from them. Right now, in the scoreboard. Taking a look here. We do the bad and the good here on Bulls and Bears, saving the best for last and starting with the best of the worst. Jonas, you're up first. You said take a bite out of profits with IBM. Well, guess what, Jonas? It's down 12% since March. You want to return this pick?
I'm going to keep it because the 4% dividend is just too tempting and will save you in a down market.
Okay, that's fair. Let's go to number 2 here. John, you said that General Electric would generate good things. Since September, it's down 30%. What do you think of it now?
I'm still a fan of General Electric. I think John Flannery's going to do a great job. I think they've also a poster child for repatriation. I think it's a leader in the Dow in 2018.
All right, you're sticking with it. All right, let me go to the worst call. Drum roll, please, for 2017. Gary V, you said buy Bed Bath & Beyond. But guess what? It's down 44% since last February. So what do you do now? Do you buy, do you sell, or do you hold it?
I must have missed the whole online retail thing when I made this prediction. I would get rid of it. It's these big box retailers are going the way of the dinosaur.
Really? But you know, some of these retailers have actually been buoyed lately. You know, good retail sales numbers, but you're still not into them, huh?
Not this one, no.
All right. Not that one. All right, let's go to the best calls. This is the good news here. Jonas, you're going to kick things off here. Jonas, back in May, you said to drink up the Brown-Forman Corporation. It's up 42% since then. Wow. Do you still like it?
I'm taking my profits off that and investing into actual liquor for the New Year's. Thank you.
Really? All right. Take those profits. On to number 2. John. Almost a year ago, you thought that Home Depot would be pretty amazing, and, well, you were right. It's up 42%. Now, are you keeping this one?
Absolutely. I've had it for years. It's been one of the best stocks I've ever bought. The tax policy, because they have so much of their earnings in the United States, is going to be a huge benefit to Home Depot. I think it goes up further.
Wow. All right, let's go to number 1. The number 1 call, everyone. In 2017, Gary V, last January, you predicted Caterpillar would dig up some green, and, well, you know what? People agreed, and look at that, up 63%. Since you said to buy it. So do you buy more here, or are you cashing out?
No, I would continue to hold, maybe buy a little bit more, because of the flip side of my previous prediction, you can't move Earth online. That's why I like Caterpillar for a growing economy.
Yeah. Well, it may benefit from a new tax plan and less regulation. It's good to see you all. It's time for the best picks for 2018. These predictions, Gary B's prediction.
I'm going to go with my old reliable for the past few years. Amazon keeps killing it, up 40% this year.
John.
CVS, I own it. It's been a laggard, but I think with that, whether the deal goes through or not, it's one of the best Dow stocks, one of the best stocks of the year for 2018.
And Jonas.
I've got clients in Vanguard Telecom ETF. I think that's going to be the big win with the tax cuts and the net neutrality working in their favor, up 20% this year.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us. Good stuff, you guys. Happy New Year. Charles Payne is in for Neil Cavuto. He's next.
As the ball drops on a new year, is America about to drop $1 trillion on infrastructure? Hello, everyone. I'm Charles Payne in for Neil Cavuto. The Trump administration preparing a new infrastructure deal for 2018. New reports say officials are working on a $1 trillion plan to be unveiled in January. But Ben Stein says slow down. With over $20 trillion in national debt, we can't risk adding any more. Ben's here along with Kennedy, Larry Glazer, and Jamu Green. Charlie and Adam are off this week. Ben, your thoughts?
Well, I think we can spend $1 trillion if we only spend $1 million of it a week, but we have to do it on the installment plan. But no, we cannot afford $1 trillion over the next few years and a $1.5 trillion tax cut. We're putting Americans and our children, our grandchildren in the risk of default. We just cannot afford to keep spending money like drunken sailors. I know I do spend money like a drunken sailor, and I know it's not a good way to behave for an individual or for a nation.
And no disrespect, but most drunken sailors has earned their money. So if they want to spend it that way, then that's their prerogative.
They're hardworking guys, and they served us very well in World War II. God
Absolutely.
bless them.
You know, Kennedy, and I think this message is also floating around D.C. because apparently this package will include public and private, and even raising $200 billion from the federal government's getting some pushback.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. And Ben talks about future generations. Our children's children will have a great appreciation for these bridges because they'll be living under them, because they won't be able to afford housing. They're going to be completely broke.
You know, Jammu, the interesting thing here is that this is a project, infrastructure is something that Democrats have really said they wanted a lot. They had a big bill under President Obama. Most complained afterwards that it wasn't enough money. So they look like they're going to be on board with this.
I'm certainly in favor of some infrastructure spending, but I don't think Democrats are going to buy into another windfall for the private sector. Certainly, we could have afforded a $1 trillion infrastructure bill before we gave away a $1.5 trillion tax cut. Maybe we could have reversed the order of things in D.C. But if Trump moves forward with solely tax credits to the private sector, that's not going to work. We do have schools that are crumbling, bridges that are falling, roads that need repair. But if this is solely led by the private sector,
your resentment toward the private sector,
they're only going to be profit-driven.
So your resentment toward the private sector would stop you from building new hospitals and schools?
I don't have resentment for the private sector. I just don't want the profit motive to be what drives infrastructure repairs. So if a private sector doesn't think that they can get back their money by helping to rebuild schools, they're not going to do that. They're going to go and focus on roads where they can increase tolls, or electric utilities where they can increase the rates. So there has to be a balance between this, and I'm afraid that this administration is solely focused on tax credits for the private sector.
But I think we can look to the private sector for some taxes. I mean, there's no reason that we should not have a higher gasoline tax. We have on our staff here at Fox an incredibly wonderful person named Dagan, who's been pushing for years for higher gasoline taxes, and she's totally right. If we're going to have big improvements in the roads and bridges and tunnels and so forth, why not have a higher gasoline tax? There's no reason not to have that. Why not have a higher tax on utilities? There's no reason that we cannot raise taxes to pay for these things. I mean, this is a very rich country. While it's still rich, before our grandchildren are sleeping under the bridges, let's raise the taxes enough to put us on a solid financial footing.
Let's bring in the proxy on today's show for the private sector. Larry, you're up. Now, I would say that the profit motive has gotten us to drugs that help our life expectancy go to almost 100 years. They've gotten us devices that make us communicate with our kids while they're in school. I think the profit motivation has actually made America the #1 country in the world. Despite all of that, are they going to be lured into this sort of deal? Can they come up with $800 billion to fulfill this plan?
Sure. Charles, this is a need to have, not a want to have. We need competitive roads, bridges, tunnels, infrastructure to be a competitive country. It's embarrassing when you visit other countries and you see their airports, their roads, their bridges are much better than ours, and we squander money left and right like drunken sailors. And, what's interesting is we had a missed opportunity in the tax plan. We could have used some of that $2 to $3 trillion of corporate private sector cash that was overseas to be taxed to pay for the infrastructure. Instead, we look at things like privatization, toll roads, gas tax, which are all regressive taxes. So I'm not in favor of increasing taxes to pay for something when the money was already available. We could have paid for this, and it's a bipartisan issue. This would unite both sides of the aisle. It would be a great thing for the country if we could just find a way to pay for it.
I think everyone out there, Kennedy, has their own tales of potholes or something. Everyone has their own infrastructure nightmare out there watching this show, and that's, in my mind, what should make this easier. The debate on how to pay for it, I think, could get muddled in the sense that, hey, let's get it done if everyone agrees that it's so urgent.
But everyone pretends like we can afford all of this. And it's funny because the same crowd that gets so upset about Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all doesn't seem to bat an eyelash about the amount of money it would cost for infrastructure. There are most people who are more invested in health care and making sure the government doesn't screw up health care, because Larry's right. Like, that's an absolute absolute need. That's an absolute necessity. If you require cancer treatment or your child needs surgery or something else, it's sad that there are roads and bridges that are crumbling and in a state of disrepair, but there are other ways of paying for them, and somehow...
How would you pay for them?
I think that we have to have, there are toll roads specifically in California that, you pay for, and you don't have to pay for them as a taxpayer, but if you use them, then you go ahead and pay for the toll road. And
why don't we have a tax on marijuana in California? We're now going to have recreational pot being legal. Let's have a huge tax on marijuana.
If the tax is too big, Ben, then you create an even bigger black market. There's a $13 billion marijuana black market right now in California. They're proposing that the legal market will be about $5 billion. If you overtax it, then it's going to be even less than that. You will increase the black market, therefore increasing crime. That's
all right, so let me go back to Jammu, and we'll get off the weed comments for just a moment, okay, and return to him during the break. But Jammu, again, you, Larry, both brought up the tax bill. That's in the rearview mirror. We're dealing with the reality. January's upon us. To have a great economy, you need great roads. And this is something that universally everyone's agreeing on. So I'm still not sure how politically Democrats are going to push back on this very topic that they've championed for so long, because there might be some sliver of it that creates profits for the private sector.
Look, I don't think we're talking about a sliver. I think we're talking about perhaps another windfall for the private sector, and there has to be some balance here. I think that is possible. I am in favor of Democrats coming to the table legitimately and sitting down with the administration and saying, this is the best way forward. I don't think this is an area where we should be full-on resistance, but we also need to hold the line when it comes to making sure that the spending that goes into our infrastructure is not just driven by the profit motive. Because
what's wrong with the profit motive, though? I mean, that's where costs come down and you introduce competition. That's not a bad thing.
I get that. I get that, Kennedy. But
who else would you have build the roads?
If a private company is not going to if a private company is not going to be able to make money by investing in a school, per se, to help rebuild it, and they're only going to focus on roads, what happens to that school? So we have to find that balance, because our schools are also a big part of our economy.
I mean, that doesn't make sense.
Let Ben in first, real quick.
I mean, surely you're not opposed to contractors building roads or contractors building schools. I mean, that's how it's always been. Even public universities, public high schools, private contractors build those.
Absolutely.
All right,
absolutely, that's the way it should be. It's how the
last final word to Larry. Let Larry squeeze in here, please, guys.
There's a history of cost overruns on big public works projects. They become a payday for people on the government dole. But at the end of the day, we're starting with a $20 trillion debt. That's the problem. It more than doubled under the Obama administration. It's going to continue to rise under the Trump administration. That's why we don't have the money. Unless they're willing to cut something, the money's not going to be there. And it's too bad the debt is where it is. But that's our starting point. We have to find a way to make some cuts if we're going to pay for this.
Let's not even forget, you know what? We started with the war analogy and the Navy analogy. Even back in the day, World War II, people bought those war bonds in part because they were patriotic, but in part because they knew they'd make a profit on them as well. All right, guys, thank you all very much. Apple apologizing after admitting to doing something many users suspected all along, but will an apology be enough?
Today on Forbes on Fox, U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley announcing this week a $285 million funding cut to the UN budget. But does it go far enough? We'll debate that. Plus, just as you're booking a trip on Google to escape winter, a new report says Google's in cahoots with travel sites to steer you to higher priced packages. A story you can't afford to miss. We'll see you at the top of the hour.